Welcome back to the Hive. Today we're going to talk about 1972 Speedway. Do you remember the 1972 Speedway? Maybe not. Maybe some of you did. But first, if you like this video on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. We're going to have a fun show today, and we're going to talk about Costa Mesa Speedway in 1972. It was a really fun place to go. Is on Friday night at the Costa Mesa Speedway, and the adult prices were just $4 for adults and like $2 for children. And under 12 years old, it was free. So if you're under 12 years old, let's say you're 12 years old and you say like, I'm 11, and then you're 13 years old, you say, I'm 11. You get in for free. No pay, no pay. So you always are 11 years old when you went to Costa Mesa Speedway, and then your parents didn't have to pay no money. We like that one. So that was a lot of fun. And also the car parking, if you went to the Speedway races back in the day, back in those early days, that car parking was free. No expense to park your car. And also you had free programs. So you go to the races and you'd have the free programs. Dennis and Gene Fink printed those programs since 1968. And to this day, they're still printing them. Although Dennis has since passed away a few years ago. Rest in peace, Dennis. We sure love Dennis Fink. And they go ahead, I guess Gene continues to print those programs when the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds opens up again. Hopefully this year in 2021. Here's a program from the 1972 Speedway season. It was one of my first races that I won as a very, very young child. And it's Mike Bass on the cover with Rick Woods in Hot Pursuit. And it was a September day in 1972. This was actually the program that I kept this program as a little kid. So we're going to use this program tonight for the show. And I don't have a lot of programs, but I kept that one. So that's going to be really cool. And also, like only a month later in October, 3 weeks later, they had the United States Nationals. And it was really great. In 1971, Mike Bass won the Nationals the year before, and he beat Mike Conley. Do you remember Big Mike Conley? He was a tall guy, and he was sponsored by Red Line Oil, maybe like Justice Brothers, I think in the early days, I don't know. But Mike Conley was really good. And then Mike Bass beat Mike Conley for the 71 United States Speedway Championship. And that was the end pretty much of Mike Conley. And that was the beginning of Michael Bass. So one Mike was going out, Michael Conley, and one Mike was coming in, and that was Michael Fast Bass, as Bruce Penhall refers to him as the fast guy. So anyways, in 72, we had the United States Nationals, and Rick Woods had won the 1968 National Championship at Whiteman Stadium. He had won the 1970 National Championship at the Costa Mesa Speedway. And 3 weeks later, in 1972, in October, just 3 weeks from now, Rick Woods won his third and final United States Speedway Championship. Rick Woods finished with 3 United States Championships. And this October in 1972 was the last time that Rick Woods actually won that United States Championship. But he won 3 U.S. Speedway Championships, and he was one of the only guys to win those championships besides the Bass brothers in the 1970s. So Rick Woods actually had a really great year, and he did really great, especially in the early 70s. Rick Woods was the bomb. So that was cool. And so anyways, Mike Bass, he went on after that to win like 6 of the next 7 United States National Championships in the 70s. So Mike Bass actually won like 70% of the United States Speedway Nationals in the 70s. And then his brother, Steve, won the Nationals in like 74. So the Bass brothers won 80% of the United States Speedway Championships in the 70s. That's amazing. I'd like to see that one repeated. And Rick Woods won those 2 in 70 and 72. So it was pretty much all the Bass brothers and Rick Woods in 1970. That was it. Nobody else won the Speedway National Championship. That's pretty cool. That's pretty amazing. So also Rick Woods won that championship that night in 72 with a maximum score of 15 points. Rick Woods was an amazing rider, and he had these great sponsors. He had like Ed Schaefer. He had Mr. Penhall, Mr. Sagalos, and he had Premier helmets. Let's see, here's Premier helmets. He had Premier helmets. Rick Wood, where is Rick? Come here, Rick. We want to see you. I don't know where he's at. He's up here somewhere. Oh, I got the wrong page. I guess it helps to put Rick on the right page, right? Put Rick on the right page. Sorry about that. There's Rick Woods with his in 1972. Rick passed away a few years ago, and we sure miss Rick a lot. He's just an amazing guy, amazing rider, and he was sponsored by Premier Yamaha, and that was on like Huntington Beach. Rick Woods was a handsome guy, and he was a rocket. That was his nickname, the Rocket. Rick Woods was just an amazing rider and fast. I always remember Rick just hauling butt. He was a pole rider, and he was great. So Rick Woods was an amazing rider. And in 1972 was the only year that our good friend Scott Autry, he actually got second place in the United States Nationals. So Rick Woods won with 15 points. Scott Autry was second place with 13 points, and Michael Bass started winning all those championships. He was third place after Scott Autry, and then Scott Autry went to England and Europe, and he was in like the '76 World Championship finals, and he went on to his fame in Europe. But Scott Autry was a good rider, and he was second place in the United States Nationals. So that's where he kind of probably his first big, break was getting that podium spot, number 2 to Woods with 13 points. He dropped a point to Rick Woods and maybe somebody like Bass or something, who knows. But anyways, Scott Autry was an amazing rider, and then Mike got third place. But let's go back to the racing. Let's go way back to 1972 Speedway. It was really cool. And it was good times, and the Speedway was really great. And like I say, the program, here's, like I say, Rick Woods beating, Mike Bass beating Rick Woods, excuse me, the other way around. And that's the original program that I had, and I don't know why I kept it, but I kept it. And it was September 20th, 1972 was the program. I had probably gone to Speedway a few times. That was like my first year I ever went. And I told that story of how this classmate of mine, Mike DeMont, he invited me over to the Speedway. His sister worked in the beer booth at Costa Mesa. And he took me one time, and then he took me, and I loved it. I fell in love with it. It was like the same year. It was like maybe a few weeks earlier, or like a month. And he took me, and then I loved it. I just fell in love with like the Speedway, with the Woods, the Bass brothers, Cody, all these really famous, great riders in the early day. And I just loved the Speedway. I loved motorcycles, so much fun. It was great. And I just loved it. I didn't dream of being a racer. I just loved going there. It was like fun. So the next week, I went up to my friend, Mike DeMont, and I said, in school, and this is a little school kid, and I said, Mike, can I go to the Speedway races Friday night? Because it was like Thursday or something. And he said, no, Brian, you can't go no more. My sister will get fired, and you'll never go to a Speedway race again, so you can't go, and you're not going to go to Speedway no more with us and stuff. And I was like, oh. So I said, no, I'm going to Speedway. You are not going to stop me, Mike. You're not going to stop me. So I asked my mom, I think I was underage. I think it was free. So I said, give me a ride to Costa Mesa. I'll hitchhike home. I'll get a ride home. I'll knock to the guy next to me. Hey, do you live over in Chapman Avenue? Like when you go home, you go by the freeway drop me off at the park, at Yorba Park, and I will go walk home late at night. I didn't care. I just wanted to go to the Speedway, and I got the ride. I was able to beg my way to the Speedway. I didn't need Mike no more. I could find my own way as a little boy. I was determined to go to the Speedway races, and it was a lot of fun. I used to start going every week. I'm like, forget it, you know. It was great. So, anyways, actually, the thing I love to do in my first year is I love to go like close to the crash wall turn where all the mud flies on. I loved all that mud. Harry Oxley and Jack Mills, they put lots of dirt, lots of DG and towards the crash wall. And Costa Mesa is a small track, right? Everyone knows that. And a lot of the riders have to go on the outside to pass to try to get some advantage and pass those like Rick Woods and Mike Bass. So you got a lot of these guys going deep dirt, and so they would like put dirt all over the place. So I would jump over the wall during like the intermission when they're dragging the track with that like the Datsun pickup truck or whatever it was, and I would jump over the wall. I would like go and grab the tear-offs. And then the security guard was like, "Hey, you can't do that." And I just did that. I'm taking the tear-offs off the ground because when the riders ride, they have like tear-offs and they throw them on the ground. So I was scrambling all over the Speedway track during the intermission, not the races, but during the intermission. And then I would give all the tear-offs to my friends, like, here, here, here. So we'd all like watch the races like this with the tear-offs. Blood would fly and our eyes would be like, protected. So that was fun. So one of the fun things that I liked is going to jump on the track and illegally. I probably should get thrown in jail for that, but as a little boy, I guess I just said, forget that. A lot of us were troublemakers, and I was a troublemaker, so I would always jump over the wall and make sure. And I didn't care. I was at the Speedway. These guys are cool, and who cares? So I picked up, and so we enjoyed sitting close and having all that mud. A lot of people were drinking like Coke and beer and stuff, and all the mud would go in their Coke, and they'd go, "Oh, okay, I got my beers full of mud or my Coke." It was really funny. I was always laughing. I said, "You have to move up higher. We're on the first row, the second row. You have to go up to like the fifth row or a 10th row, and then you're not going to have any dirt in your beer. You go very high in the nosebleed section." But we liked to be close to the track. It was really great. And, getting blasted was probably one of the funnest things. And also, if you were close to the Speedway track at Costa Mesa, you could smell that oil. They had this castor oil. And it was the most beautiful smell. I think it was like better than anything. Go there like just to get high on the castor oil. Like, everybody liked it. Even Gene Woods, the amazing brother of Rick Woods, said, "We liked the castor oil smell in the 70s." And that's true. I mean, we all smell that. It probably made us crazy and insane, but who cares? We liked it. It was fun. The castor oil was really filled the air with this aroma of castor oil. And, oh, God, it was just, you'd have to experience that one. It was really cool. And it was a lot of fun. So Friday night was really great, and it was a lot of fun to just have the dirt fly on you, smell the castor oil. It was great. And the riders came out, and they were charging. They were riding hard. Why? Because they paid a lot of money back in those days. I mean, some of these guys made like $1,000 or $2,000 a night at the most. Because of the purse, they had the regular Speedway purse. It was actually pretty good. And then they had 30% or 35% of the gate. So the riders, when they, every person, like the ticket admission was $4 for adults and $2 for children over 12. But I was always under 12. I was always like 11. I'm 10 years old. I'm like 14. I'm like, I'm 11. I would always get a Speedway for free. That was good. And then I'd buy a Coke with my money, I think, and have a drink, something. But anyways, they went ahead and had those races, and it was a lot of fun. And the riders, they got, like I say, 30 to 35% gate, so which means that so the $4 ticket that every adult, which was actually there's like 5,000 people or 6,500 people like filling this arena, this little arena at Costa Mesa, and the riders split 40 or 35% to 30% of all that money that people pay to come into the race. Plus, they get a guaranteed prize money, like let's say your handicap race of scratch racing, handicap race of your first race, and then your scratch racing, and then your semi-main event for scratch and handicap, and the main event and handicap and scratch. You get paid for every race that you won. So let's say you ran the table and you won all your scratch races and all your handicap races. You could easily pull more than $2,000 in a night. So that's 1972. That's not 2021. So that money was probably like triple. So it was like $6,000 in white. So can you imagine if you're like a Speedway rider making $6,000 in one night? That is a good day. And those guys were hard charging because they actually made a ton of money. I mean, Sonny Nutter's first house from the Speedway, and Bill Cody, I think he saved his money and bought his Jawa distributorship from all that money. Bill Cody was actually one of the leading money getters at that time. He made the most money around 72. And from 72, 71 to 75, he was always in the top 5. So Bill Cody just cleaned up. I mean, they all made lots of money, really. Not just Bill, but Bass Brothers cleaned up, and Rick Woods, and everybody was sharing the wealth. So it was a really great. And so in that day in September of 1972, it was the 40-yard line riders was actually on that particular program was the furthest riders back. And Costa Mesa is a tiny track. I think it's 180 yards or something. So 90 yards is like, is almost halfway around the track. So if you go 40 yards back, that's at the crash wall. So the riders were pretty much at the crash wall. So when the handicap race started, they were almost at the crash wall. And if you went to the 50, you were beyond the crash wall. So you had to like slide a little bit and then go straight, to the first turn while everyone else had a big jump on you. And when Speedway first started, they didn't know like how to handicap these guys. Rick Woods had won the 1968 United States Championship. So he was penalized or back to the 90-yard line or 80 or 90 or 100 or something. So Rick Woods had to start halfway around the track. So he'd be looking at the guys, and they'd be like over there, and he'd be like over here, and he'd start, and he was way behind. And then that was too far. And so they had to adjust that because they didn't know, like at the beginning of Speedway in 69, they had no idea. But Rick Woods was like almost halfway around the track when they started, but it was too far. And then they had to kind of make it shorter. So the 40 and the 50 was pretty much the most. Once in a blue moon, you would have the 60, but not very much, the 60-yard line back. But the 40 was what they raced that night. And the riders were the top 3 riders that night. There's only 3 riders on the 40 that particular night in 1970. And that was Mike Bass, Steve Bass, and Rick Woods, the future champion, U.S. champion. In 3 weeks, Rick Woods was racing at the 40-yard line, and he was the top dog. And he was just, like I say, in the turn. They were all like kind of in the halfway in the middle of the turn, and they had to point their Speedway bikes straight, and there was a turn. So when the races started, they go, ah! And they would kind of hit the pole, the pole, and they would like drive straight to the first turn. And those guys, of course, would have a big advantage on the 0-yard line or 10, and then the 40. So that was pretty cool to watch. Those guys way at the back, and wow, they were fast and they were good. So it was a good time. And the next guys were on the 30-yard line. There was a stack of guys on the 30-yard line. We have Greg Hazarat. He's going to be on our show like in 2 days or something like that, a couple of days. So you want to see that show with Greg Hazarat. He is an amazing guy. He was a 30-yard line rider on 72. And the guy was fast. He wasn't like most of us rode motorcycles and we kind of advanced to Speedway. Greg Hazerat, which is all of a sudden was a racer. He raced Speedway, flat track, whatever. And then when he got done with his Speedway days, he just quit riding motorcycles. He goes, no, I'm a racer. So that guy only raced motorcycles, only raced. He didn't like have fun and like enjoy, like we all have kind of fun. But Greg Hazerat said, if it's not racing, I'm not interested. So he was a racer. That guy was a racer. So we're going to talk with Greg Hazerat, and he's just an amazing guy. That guy was a hard charger, tough guy, you know, good guy, good racer. He's a great guy today, and we're looking forward to that, Greg Hazerat. And so he was on the 30 back in 72 and was sliding Sonny Nutter. Do you know sliding Sonny Nutter? I think you know, the old flat tracker. And Sonny was the team captain of the USA, and he was an amazing rider. I think one time Greg Hazerat, he told me that when the early days of Speedway, I probably shouldn't tell you the story. I'm going to tell you. In the early days of Speedway at Whiteman Stadium, they didn't have like the balls, you know, when you pick the balls out of the hat. They just had like whoever got to the starting gate first had that position. So when they bumped the bikes off, you had to race for your pole position, you know, because there was no pit steward to like get the balls out of the thing like if you're in gate 1, 2, 3, or 4. There was none of that. So in the early days of Speedway, what they did is they bumped you off, and then you'd race to wherever you are, like gate 1, you know, I'm in gate 1. So one time in Whiteman Stadium, Greg Hazerat, you know, he was racing Sonny Nutter, the Bass Brothers and Woods and all these guys, all these top dogs. He was a good rider. You have to be good to ride those guys. And Sammy Tanner was back in that day. You know, Sammy was a hot TT rider with over 400 Ascot wins in TT. I mean, Sammy Tanner was a legend, and he was racing back at Whiteman, and all these really good riders. Like Hazerat was there. And Greg he's a smart guy. He's really smart. And he said, I'm going to start my bike first, and then I'm going to go to the pole position at Whiteman Stadium, and I'm going to have gate 1, so nobody can take gate 1. So Greg was like a younger rider, and like Sonny Nutter is like, you know, kind of like a mature, you know, really good rider at the time. He's a very famous rider and a, you know, top rider at Whiteman. So Greg Hazerat, he actually got to gate 1, and he's like, okay, I got gate 1, you know. He wanted to pull on that particular track, which is a good spot. So he's there, he's getting ready for the race. And next thing he did, to his left, he heard, and he looked over, and then there was Sonny Nutter on the infield. And Greg looked at Sonny and he said, what are you doing? And Sonny said, move over, Greg. He said, and he's like, I'm Sonny Nutter, you move over. So Greg had the pole position. Sonny was in the infield, was like hitting him, like, get over, you punk. And so Greg's like, oh, okay. He was like, I think he was a young kid at the time. So Greg had to move over to like gate 1 and 1.5 between gate 2 and gate 1. So they're all squeezed together. And Sonny moved his bike in gate 1. So they had to fight for that pole position. And Sonny Nutter wasn't going to get denied by some young rider named Greg Hazerat. That is a classic story. I mean, I could just see Sonny Nutter like, get out of my way, get over in gate 2, you jerk. That was cool. I like that story. So the 30-yard line was Sonny Nutter, the guy who just pushed Greg Hazerat off the pole. Nice guy. And also Lightning Larry Shaw. Do you remember Lightning Larry Shaw? We're trying to get Larry on the program. I don't know if he'll come on. He was a really great rider in the early day, and he sponsored Sean McConnell and in the juniors, and he was just a really, you know, Lightning Larry was on. Nobody could beat Larry Shaw. He was great. He was, you know, all these classic riders. And Mike Caruso, number 54. Do you remember Mike Caruso? He was fast, and he was just a really top rider. I mean, that guy was always in the mix. And they had like a 1950s or 1960s rider at the 30-yard line. He was Les Chenke. And Les was like an old guy. I think he was like 50-year-old guy. And he had been racing for many years, like flat track and all over at Whiteman. I think he was on the Whiteman program a lot. And Les Chankey was really a famous early day rider, and I don't think he raced too much past 1972 because I think he was old. But Les Chankey was on the 30-yard line, and you got to be good to be on the 30-yard line. And he was definitely one of the oldest riders and a flat tracker on the thing. So anyways, and then they had the 20-yard riders. They had Steve Gresham, Jim Gresham's brother. I raced Steve a couple of times. And Larry Moon, he was the referee's son. He was pretty good, Larry Moon. He wasn't the best, but Larry Moon, was always competitive. And maybe once in a blue moon, Larry would win a main event. But he was a solid, steady rider. I always remember him. He wore those red leathers, and I forgot his number, but he was always wearing the red with a white number on that. That was Larry Moon, the referee's son. He had an unfair advantage. Anytime a rider has a referee for a dad, that's not fair. You should never be a referee and have a son racing. And I don't agree with that. I think that's totally illegal. It should be illegal because I never agree. If I had a son or whatever that was racing, I don't think I would be fair if I was refereeing him because you love your son and you give your advantage to your son. And I don't know if Larry Moon's dad did that, but I just never thought that was a cool thing in Speedway. You should have a son racing and refereeing your own blood. It should be neutral. Neutral would be the best. And then also we had Ron Taylor. Do you remember Ron Taylor? He was a cool guy. And actually, I bought my first leathers from Ron Taylor. He lived up in like Tribuco Canyon or something. Maybe he still does. And I was so desperate when I had bought my first uniform. I didn't have any money, really. I had like $50. I think Ron was selling his uniform for like $50. So I went up to Tribuco Canyon, far up into the canyon, past like all these places up there, and went ahead. And his uniform was really. Ron Taylor is a small guy, and I was kind of tall and skinny. Ron Taylor was small and skinny, but I was like 6 foot tall, 6'1". I was kind of tall, and Ron had this uniform, a little uniform, a Speedway uniform. It's made for like a midget guy, and he goes, "This is my uniform," and it was real small, and I needed the uniform because I needed to race. I needed a Speedway uniform. So I put this uniform on me, this top, and I'm like, oh, and I put this in the shirts on, like, oh, and I couldn't move because, it was just so small. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I can't move my arm. So I paid $50 and I bought that uniform. And I went ahead and I put my name on the front. If you see any of my old pictures, I should probably pull one. I don't know if I have one on me right here, but I had like Brian put on it. Let's see if I can find one. I don't know if I have one here. I probably don't, but I had my name taped on it. I think I don't right now. And anyways, I had my name taped on my thing and my front, and I didn't prepare for that. Sorry about that. This is me when I was a young Speedway rider. I was a handsome guy, and what happened to me? What happened? I was a young Speedway rider, and I wanted to race motorcycles. I didn't find my Speedway picture, but this was me when I was like a little 16-year-old kid. And I'm not 16 no more, but I'm a lot smarter than when I was like this. I was like a troublemaker, and now I'm a nice guy. So anyways, I bought this uniform from Ron Taylor, and it didn't fit me, and I taped my name in duct tape, Bryan, and I had duct tape on my front. And I used to look at all these guys, like oh gosh, like Siggy, Dennis Segalos. He had beautiful Bates leathers and all perfect, and I had my name with duct tape, Bryan. And I had no gloves. I raced bare knuckled. I'll show you that sometime. It was really fun. I didn't have gloves. Who needs gloves? D3. Who needs gloves when you're a D3 rider? Let's not talk about that. Let's go back to and then so we had Ron Taylor, and we had two guys on the 30-yard line. Rest in peace. They both have passed away since. And we had a really good rider. He was a good rider, Guy Watterson. Do you remember Guy Watterson? He was really good. He was a solid rider, and he was just a hard charger, kind of like Greg Hazerat. Guy Watterson was a great rider. And there was another good rider on the 30, and he was moving up in his class. He became a famous rider, and that was Danny Berserko Becker. Danny Becker was the bomb. I mean, that guy was crazy, wheeling around the track on one wheel, and he was wild, and he was great. I think you had Sonny Nutter, the first cover boy, handsome boy in Speedway, because Sonny was very handsome. I don't have any pictures of him right here, but Sonny was very handsome. And then you had Danny Becker was the next handsome boy of Speedway. All the girls would like call him up. He had to change his number like 9 times because he would pick up, and then girls would say, "Hi, Danny, would you like to have my baby with me?" And Danny was like, "Oh, no." And then he got me up on the girls. The girls were like, "I love you, Danny. Could you have my baby?" And he's like, "No, no." So Danny Becker was hassled on the telephone back in the landline days. And so he had to change his number like 9 times. Then you had one of the last glamour boys was Bruce Penhall back in the mid-70s, the latter 70s. He had all the girls chasing him, and none of the girls chased us. I mean, when the girls saw us, like they're like, "Oh, I'll go with Bruce Penhall. I'm not going to go with you." So the girls all went to Bruce, which was bad because he hogged all the chicks, and we liked some of those 19-year-old girls, but we couldn't get any of them because Bruce had them all. So that was fun in those days. And then we had the 10-yard line riders, and that was Ron Stewart. Ron Stewart was the sponsor of Danny Becker. He ran the mini bike shop in Garden Grove next to Cody's. I used to go there and see Ron. He has like the red hair, the beard, the big beard, what do they call it? The mustache beard. And he's a nice guy, Ron Stewart. He sponsored and got Danny Becker in a Speedway, bought his first Speedway bike. Ron Stewart was a D1 rider on the 10-yard line in the early days. So he's a good guy, and he was a good person. Gene Woods get involved in Speedway, sponsoring goods, gave him a nice T-shirt too. So Ron's mini cycles was really famous, and Ron Stewart was the owner of the Ron's mini cycles. And I think he's still working. I don't know, he's still alive and he's still kicking. And Ron definitely has a piece of history in the Speedway. So we really appreciate all that Ron did for, especially Danny Becker. He was like his father. He mentored Danny Becker and helped him become the star that Danny developed. So Ron Stewart was a big influence on Danny Becker. And one of my favorite riders who was kind of a no-name rider on the 0-yard line time, I had a couple of these good guys, was Troy McKee. He was really cool. I don't know why. He had these like blue and yellow leathers or something. I can't remember, but I liked Troy McKee. He was cool. And then at that time, the new 0-yard line in 72 in September was sexy Jeff Sexton, number 14, became number 14. He was become a Division II rider and then quickly went to Division I. And Jeff Sexton, he was in a couple podiums in the Nationals a few years later. And Jeff Sexton was an amazing rider. I'm friends with his wife, and they're really nice people. So we really liked Jeff Sexton, and he was a great rider. Jeff Sexton was awesome. I mean, that guy could ride a motorcycle. And then we had Bill Manley. I didn't know Bill much. And then had Bruce Hazerat, the half brother. I think he passed away a couple of years ago. Rest in peace, Hazerat. And he's the half brother of Greg Hazerat that we're going to have on the show. So Greg has a half brother who was a Speedway rider, and he was on the 0-yard line at that time in 72 racing. And then we had a new rider, a new kid on our block who actually was a runner-up in a future United States Championship in 75, just 3 years later. And that was Dangerous Dub Farrell, number 121. He kept his number the whole time, Dub Farrell. He never changed his number. I mean, Dub could have got numbers like 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, but he kept 121. He had a 3-digit number very proudly on his back. And Dub Farrell was good. He was my teacher, my first teacher. And we'd like to have Dub Farrell on the show because Dub was like cool guy. And I think he didn't like me because we shared the same mechanic and I was hogging his guy. And so Dub, I think, didn't like me that much. So I'd love to have Dub on the show and talk to him about his hatred towards me because I was a young punk stealing his mechanic, Jerry Fairchild, and Dub always looked at me like, I don't like you. I always liked Dub though. I was like a punky kid, so it was easy for me. I mean, look at this kid. I mean, he's easy. Like, oh, get out of here, you punk. Get out of here. He's out of there now, so he's gone. And Dangerous Dub Farrell didn't like me, and I always loved Dangerous Dub, and he taught me everything I knew, so he was a good teacher and very respected. And that day in 1972, September 20th, they had a match race with Steve Bast and Rick Woods. And from what I saw on my program right here, I underlined, I didn't even, here's my program of the night. I didn't do anything because I was a little punky kid. I didn't write in the program. And I just had like, but over here in the match race, I underlined Steve Bast on the feature match race. So Steve Bast must have won that race because I went ahead and underlined it. And so there must have been, let's see, what other D2 guys were here that you might remember? There was number 77. There was a guy in D2, number 77. Let's see. Hey, that's my number. Where is it? Right there. That's my number 77. There was a 77 in D2, and his name was Swede Fishburne. Do you remember Swede? Swede. Oh, Honey Swede was a good writer. I remember his name. Him and me have the only 77s that I know of in Speedway. And I like my number. Like Swede and I are close. We're tight, you know. I don't know him, but we're tight because we have the same number. And then let's see, Barry Odom. Oh, Sonny Nutter's cousin Steve was in D2 that night in '72. He was on the 20-yard line. Steve was an amazing rider, and he was like a podium finisher on the Nationals in '75, I believe. So he was a D2 rider on the 20 back in '72. Mark Cherry, I think he's married to Bruce Penhall's sister. So Mark Cherry's Bruce Penhall's brother-in-law. I think that's what it is. We'll talk to Bruce about that week. I hope we get Bruce on the show. We're hopefully going to get, he wants to come on the show, so we're going to try to schedule him next week. But Mark Cherry is married to Bruce's sister, and he was on the 30-yard line in D2. And then, let's see, I guess that's it. There's nobody else that we know of. Oh, Irwin Moon. Irwin Moon was the referee's, like, what was that? Was he the referee? I don't know. Irwin. He was on D3 at the time. And there was all these guys. It's hard. And Rick Moon, I guess they had another Moon brother. They had all these Moons. I hope they didn't have like a half moon or like a full moon or something that night. But they had a lot of Moon brothers. The D3 riders are really hard to announce. And when Greg Hazerat was announcing with Larry Huffman would say, "Here, Greg, you announce these D3 riders." And they're hard to read because, you know, there's a lot of slackers and stuff in D3. And so I guess Warren Moon's announcing career was cut short because he couldn't announce the good guys like Wild Bill Cody. You know, he had to announce like these names like this. And let's see a guy here. Maybe he'll kill me. Al Laurie, Ken Mack, Jim Murphy, James McKay, Daryl Taylor. So I had to announce those kind of, you know, like, who is that? And they're all crying and wiping out, and we're picking them in the ambulance. You know, like, no, it's no fun to talk about those guys. We want to talk about the D1 riders because they were good. So Warren was the announcer of all those D3 guys. And so also, like, Steve Bass, I think, won that match race that night. And I don't recall who won the scratch and handicap because I was too busy, like, playing around in the stands, going down for programs and stuff like that. So I wasn't probably watching or scorekeeping that race. As you saw, I'm not really into the scorekeeper. And but actually that year, that was September, and only 90 days later, only 3 months later, I got my first motorcycle, 72 Yamaha yellow and black, bumblebee color, mini enduro. We talked about that with Warren Reed yesterday. And it was that Christmas, only 90 days after that Speedway race, and I got my first. I woke up and Santa Claus brought me a motorcycle with a clutch, with brakes. It was like a real motorcycle, and it was a 60 Yamaha Mini Enduro. I'm like, this is the bomb. And I rode that all day long on Christmas Day, like all day long. And it was raining that day, and there was it was like a typhoon rain. And I said, I don't care. I have a motorcycle. I was in pneumonia, and I said, I don't care. I'm riding my motorcycle all day long on Christmas. And that year, 90 days after the Speedway program and that event. So also that year, around 72, year that they came out with a movie On Any Sunday. Do you remember that movie On Any Sunday? That was a bomb. That was the best motorcycle movie ever made to today. It was, I did a blog on my YouTube channel. If you type that up somewhere and find it. On Any Sunday was amazing. It really inspired so many of us riders and mechanics and followers of motorcycles to just love motorcycles. Taught that, you know, you could ride motorcycles no matter who you are. If you're a businessman, your motorcycle to work with your suit and tie. If you're a racer, you could go racing desert, flat track, road racing. They didn't have Speedway in the movie, I think, but that was kind of before Speedway was bigger. But they had all these motorcycle sports and mini bikes. You had Jeff Ward in the movie. He was doing the wheelie, and he was like riding the wheelie. Like, that's cool. Like Jeff Ward at Saddleback Park. And then you had the trials rider doing the wheelie, and then you had all the motocrossers, and it was just amazing. So that was the big motorcycle era back in 72, where they had the movie On Any Sunday, Part 1, and that was the best. The other ones were not as good, but Part 1 was really, you know, the best. So that was a really cool. And also it inspired a lot of young guys like me and tons of other guys to want to be a motorcycle racer because it was cool being one. And they rode those bicycles at the beginning of the movie doing wheelies. And we were all about the same age, and we were all like getting crazy and wild on the Schwinn bicycles with the handlebars and stuff. So it was fun. And so, next we have this interview. Next week, we have Greg Hazeroff and we have Larry Huffman coming on the program. And in this program, this one I'm showing you, where it's upside down. On this one here that we're talking about, we have an interview with Greg Hazeroff and they worked together. And this right here, it's kind of funny because I was just going through this program, and then they have this notes, and then they have this interview with Greg Hazeroff. I didn't know he was number 3. I thought he was like number 30 or something, but he must have got a 1 number, and he was number 3. So they have an interview with Greg Hazeroff and Larry Huffman. They're coming on the show in like a couple days, both those guys. So I was like, oh, I have a program that we're talking about the same night, and we have a program. Huffman says, Greg, you've been riding for a long time, haven't you? And Greg says, yes, about 4 years. And Huffman said, how did you get started in Speedway? And Greg said, brother, it got me started. I was a little young for the TT, and I was going to high school, and I was about 18 when I got into Speedway race at Whiteman. And then I saw one race, and I said, I gotta try it. This is Greg Hazeroff. My brother, my half brother, let me ride his bike, and I practiced on it for a while. Then I finally ended up riding at the tail end of the 68 season, the last part of the 68 season. We did real Class C stuff. And then when Ivan and Barry came over, they shaped us up and taught how to ride standing up. Get your butt off. This is what Ivan and Barry said. Get your butt off the seat. You are not a TT rider. You are a Speedway rider. So get up and really ride like a Speedway rider is what I told. And they did that too. All those guys were all TT riders. They had to adjust their riding style. And then he said, I really got it in 1969 and started riding regularly. I had injuries in 69 and 7, and the last year was my first full year without being hurt. So I guess Greg got hurt a lot. He told me he was a crasher. Greg was like crash all the time, but he would like win or crash. But that was cool. Like, he really had his mind going fast, and he really was a hard charger. So he would win, or like he would crash. He'd ride into people. I've seen pictures of him putting his wheel into Doug Farrell and riding these guys really hard. He's a charger for sure. And then so he said last year he did pretty well. And then Huffman said, you've had your ups and downs. It seems like whenever you got started to get in front, you would crash and you would have an injury to slow you down. See, so Greg Hazerat, Larry Huffman was saying, hey, when you're winning, you always crash. So I didn't know that. So he was a hard charger and he crashed, or he'd win a lot too. He wouldn't crash. But that was nice of Larry Huffman to say that in interview. Hey, when you're in front, you crash a lot. You're a good rider. Oh my gosh. And then let's see what else. And yeah, I've had quite a few problems at first. I tried and I'd get carried away and I'd fall. But somehow I got to where I am being pretty consistent. So all riders have to go through that learning curve. And I think Huffman was ribbing him about his early days as a crasher. And then Greg developed himself and got to be a better rider. But at first, you're crashing a lot and you're getting wild. And that's what Greg was at the beginning, but not at the end. And then he said, I've made a lot more money. I'm not falling down. Yeah, you make money when you're not falling down, Greg Hazerat said. And that's true. When you succeed and you win main events, you get more rich than when you're laying on the track and getting tires put over your back. That's better. So he says, I've only fallen down about 6 or 8 times in the last 80 races. 80, so that's not bad. Six falls out of 80. That's okay. He was getting better. And then Larry, I guess, what did he say next? What are you doing when you're not riding Speedway to Greg Hazerat? And Greg Hazerat said, I'm working at Petrochem. They make special products for motorcycle industry, probably petroleum products. He's a worker. And Huff said, do you ever get the urge to go back to riding TT? I think he would say no to this. And Greg says, I'm going to stick with Speedway. To me, it's the type of racing where it's rider against rider, not bike versus bike, as in TT or half mile. And it pits the individuals against the other riders. The bikes are fairly equal, so it just comes down to a matter of strategy. And what's most important, you've got to really think to be a racer. You've got to think to be a racer. That's right, Greg. You must always think. That's what Warren Reed was just saying yesterday. If you watch the Warren Reed show, he's like, my mind is going 1,000,000 miles a second. I have to make correct decisions every second. In order to be a champion or to win, you have to really have really good thinking, and you have to have instant thinking, and you must make the right decisions. So that's what Greg was saying, is that he likes that. And then and the Huffman said, how long do you think you'll plan on riding Speedway? And this was 72. I think he rode a couple more years. And he says, I plan to ride quite a few years. That's not true. I think he rode a couple of years only. I made a lot of progress this year, and I hope to continue it. I will work real hard in the off season, practice, and do a lot of weightlifting and running and things that keep me in shape. If things keep going like they are, I have a good job that corresponds with my racing, so I can work the two together, race and work. I plan on doing it as long as I can. So that was Greg Hazerat, and that was the announcer notes from 1972 and the program. And Larry Huffman was the writer of that. So that was in the program that we're talking about. That was Greg Hazerat. We're going to have both of those guys on the show this week, so that should be good. And then Rick Woods, like I said, he won that 72 national championship, and he was sponsored by the Premier Helmets, Ed Schaefer, the Penhall Sigaloses, and those are really cool days. And they had something else back in the early days. Do you remember Gene, the dancing machine? Do you remember Gene? He was a dancing machine. He was a disco dancer. Yeah, party. Gene was a dancer. And Gene would always have a beer. I don't have a beer here. I'm going to fake my Gatorade bottle. It was water. Let me have He would say like this. This is a beer. I don't drink beer, but he'd have a beer and he'd say, more beer. And then he would drink. Mmm. Oh, so it tastes so good. Oh, I get to drink and I get to do my show at the same time. It's very perfect. More beer. Gene would say, and then Gene would like go on the crash wall and he would walk on the crash wall. He was like half drunk, I think, because he would walk around to every section of the turn, like behind the grandstands at Costa Mesa where Larry Huffman was announcing. And then he would yell like a cheerleader, more beer. And then he would go like to turn 1 and 2 at Costa Mesa. He'd walk over. I have a video of that. I should play you sometime. And Gene's like, more beer. And then Gene would walk over to the back straightaway at Costa Mesa, the big stand area. And then he would stand in front of everyone, more beer. And he would yell. And then he would go to turn 3 and 4, and he would stand, more beer. And then he would drink every time. I like that one. Water is actually pretty good too. And so Gene would do that, and then he would walk on the crash wall. Gene, the dancing machine, would walk on the crash wall. Walk. And he was half drunk from the beer. And then he would stand on the crash wall, and then he would open up his like beer, and he'd say, more beer. And then he would drink, and he was drunk by this time because he walked around the whole track drinking beer. And then he would fall down, and he would fall with his crotch and his nuts hitting the wood from the crash wall. And he'd go, oh. But Gene was drunk, so he didn't feel a thing, you know. And I think Gene, he had like 25% of the concession stand. So all the beer that was sold at the Speedway, Gene probably made money because he went ahead. Those lines were a mile long, probably from Gene, the dancing machine. And one of the cool things about the races that night and the 72 season was the fight. They sold a lot of beer, you know, more beer, more beer. And the teenage boys got drunk. I think you need to be 21. So you had a wristband. You had a wristband on your wrist. So all the guys would send their 21-year-old friends, buy beer, and then they would have all these beers, and then they would give them to all their friends, you know, that were like 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, under 21, and they would be drinking all this beer. All these minors would be drinking. Oh, I like beer. And then some guys were, you know, when they drink beer, they're like calm, nice, you know, they're drunk or whatever. And then some guys, when they drink alcohol, they get rowdy, fight, you know, they want to fight, and so they're there, and then people are pouring beer on each other's heads, like teenage boys, like 16, 18 years old, and then they would be fighting each other, and then there'd be a fight over there, and then we look over there. Fight over there! Oh, fight down there! Oh, fight over there! There's fights everywhere. So I like that one. I didn't fight. I was like a little kid, but it was like a show, you know, like watching a Manny Pacquiao fight for free. You know, you got the Speedway. Speedway was my number one love. And then you got the fights everywhere because you had these drunk guys, and they were rowdy. They were probably like picking up on the chicks, you know, like, that's my chick. No, that's not your chick. That's my chick. And they fight, you know. Oh, that's my girl. You know, they're drunk. That girl doesn't want any of those bums. She's very, like, she wants someone nice, you know, or something, like, not drunk. So anyways, those guys were fighting like crazy, and that was really cool. And then they had all those girls I just mentioned. There's girls everywhere. They were like beach girls. They had their bikini tops. And they had, you know, short pants, and they had long blonde hair, long black hair, very beautiful ladies, young ladies, like, you know, 18 to 21, 22 years old, very gorgeous, all like college age students. And all the college age guys were drunk, and they were like, oh, I like that chick over there. No, I like that chick over there. But me, I wasn't really into girls at that time. I was into the fights and then the speedway because I didn't really care about those sexy girls. I saw them and like, oh, that's nice, you know. But I watching the speedway, so that was better for me is the races. But all those girls made the show anyways, and then they had the Fox night. Then they had the girls come in for free, and then the boys had to pay, and that's not fair. The boys had to pay for Speedway, and the girls got in for free. I don't like that one, but it brought all the boys in, the guys, the teenagers, the drinkers, and they bought lots of beer, and they got it. They paid for their admission, so it turned out really good, and they became later in the '70s. It became the Fox Night, Bruce the Fox Pedal Night, and it was really big, and lots of people went. Just the guys went to see the girls, and then the girls went in because it was free. They didn't have to pay no money, and so that was cool. And the racing was fast. The prize money was good. The dirt in your face was great. The smell of the castor oil was awesome, and just everything. The fights were good. The Speedway, the Bass Brothers, the Woods, Cody's. I mean, all those guys, Sonny Nutter, you know, all those early day riders were just all legends, and it was just great. The early days of Speedway in '72 was really fantastic, and it was really good. I don't know if there's anything else I want to show you on this thing here, but maybe not. But I think I went through most of it here. But the Speedway was really great, and it was just amazing. You know, Speedway in the '70s was just the heyday of Speedway. That was the heyday. And so we really remember those days. And I was just a little child, so I wasn't really, you know, very old, but it was fun. And if you experienced those days, you remember how fun they were. And hopefully you have the same kind of memories as I do, because I remember that like the back of my hand. Like I remember those days because they were fun. And I hope you did too. And if you didn't remember those days, let's say you're a young writer or you never experienced that day, you missed out. You missed out because it was fun. We never seen Speedway like that since like those days. I mean, Speedway changed after the rider strike and stuff. The glory days kind of changed a little bit, and the money went down, and everything kind of really. The riders kind of left. You know, like a lot of these riders, like Cody and stuff, they were making big money, and they didn't want to ride for free. So, or low money, I should say. And so things really changed. But the '72 season through about the '75, you know, something like that, '76, '75, that was the glory days. Actually, from like '69 to like '75 or '76, maybe '70. Those are the glory days of Speedway. So we're talking about the 1972 Speedway season at the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds. It was great and it was fun. And kids under 12 were free. And if you're 12 years old, you're always 11. And if you're 13, you're always 11. And if you're 14, you're always 11. And if you're 15, and if you're 22, you're always 11. No, 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 that doesn't work that way. So we had fun in those days, and it was a good time. So thank you so much for watching the 1972 Costa Mesa Fairgrounds, the bull ring at the Costa Mesa Speedway, the wild days, the glory days, the young days of Danny Berserko Becker as a 0-yard line rider. He became famous. And Doug Farrell, he became famous, and all these guys. And we just had really a great time. And Speedway was one of our things that we grew up going to as little kids. And when I was a Speedway racer, I was kind of intimidated because I wasn't really, you know, I was always enjoying the races. And so now I have to race. And I was like, oh, I liked just having fun, you know, but racing is different than like having fun, you know, like enjoying the races, wearing the screens and stuff. That's different when you're racing. One year I was racing. One year I was watching the races, buying hot dogs and hamburgers. And the next year I was racing against like Mike Bass and Bruce Penhall. I was like, oh. So it's really hard when you race these guys. But when you're watching, it's a lot easier. It's a lot fun. It's like you're an armchair quarterback. Like, oh, I could beat, you know, Mike Bass and Rick Woods. They're easy. And so, but you get yourself out on a Speedway bike and try that out for yourself and see how easy it is to ride a rocket breathing, fuel burning Speedway bike 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, and no brakes, and crazy, riding. 5 guys going into one. Try that, get off your butt and then try that. It's not as easy as like sitting down like, oh yeah, I could be a Speedway rider, because it's not that easy. If you ride a Speedway bike or rode a Speedway bike, it's a lot harder than sitting in the stands. So we can promise that one. So these guys are fantastic talent. In the 70s, they had all these great riders. So we thank you so much for watching the 1972 Speedway season. It was a lot of fun, and we just wanted to talk a little bit about that and what happened. The $4 price admission for adults. Now it's like $20. That's not fair. We need to get Brad Oxley to lower it back to 1972 price. $4. I like that one. I can afford to go to Speedway for $4. And the kids were $2. And the children 12 and under were free, no charge. So it was a good time. The early days Speedway was really good. Gene, the dancing machine, was really great. So we like Gene, and he's still alive supporting Speedway, and he's really great. I don't think he's dancing as much these days, and I hope he's not drinking as much beer, because Gene is an older guy now, and I don't think that's healthy. And falling in the crash wall, hitting your nuts, I think that's not healthy when you're like 70 years old or something. So we advise Gene, the dancing machine, not to do that no more. No more drinking, no more crashing on the crash wall. We're all just having a good time. So thank you so much for watching the live stream, enjoying the show in the Hive tonight. We're just kicking back here, having a good day, and we're going to go to the beach after this, and we're going to have some fun. So thank you so much. We've got some good shows this week. We have Greg Hazerat, like I mentioned earlier. I read his little bio. And we have Larry Huffman, who interviewed Greg in the interview. We have him coming. And hopefully we'll get Bruce Penhall this week. I want to have Bruce is going to do the show. And I'm like, hey, Bruce, do you want to do the show like this week? So I'm waiting for Bruce Penhall. And when he comes on, or when he's coming on, I will let you know. So if you subscribe and ring the bell, you'll be notified when Bruce Penhall comes on, because you won't want to miss the legend, because we're going to have fun with Bruce Penhall, because we have a lot of good stuff to go over with the Penhall. And with Greg Hazerat, he was in the early days of Speedway. And with the Motor Mouth, Larry Huffman, he was one of the famous Speedway announcers of all time. Him and Bruce Flanders were the best. So anyways, we're going to have lots of fun, and it's going to be a good time here at the Hive. Thank you so much for watching. Keep your bike on 2 wheels, no crashes, stay safe, be smart, and have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us in the Hive, and we'll see you next show. Take care. Have a good one.